and saw her this morning. I said, oh, turned out nice again. We're both sort of standing there soaking wet.
Oh, God.
Typical British summer. But yes,
Typical.
I think the weather's telling us what it thought of the football.
Well, exactly. Yeah.
Oh.
Exactly. Oh, I know.
Yeah.
It'll take a couple of days and then we'll all forget about it and move on.
Exactly. Well, I do think that this is going to spur us on to the World Cup, but I know you don't. But
well, no, we've been here before. Anyway, right.
Okay, are we ready to rock?
We are, indeed.
Marvellous. Okay, right. Got everything? Yeah. 3, 2, 1. This is Trainer Talk, the podcast, brought to you by Sharon Gaskin of the Trainers Training Company and me, Ginette Tessier of the Get That Gang. In our weekly show, we cover news and views from our businesses, along with a top-of-mind topic. Of course, it wouldn't be Trainer Talk the podcast without the Dog Walking Digest, and every now and again we invite a guest along to share their experience and expertise. After 90 episodes of just audio, we're now on YouTube as well. So feel free to catch up there. Just search for the Trainers Training Company or the Get That Gang, or download us on audio only through your favourite podcast streamer. So why not sit back with a cuppa, make that journey or chore go a little bit quicker with our weekly inspiration for developing your training business. Welcome. This is Trainer Talk, the podcast, and we're at episode number 114. And this week, we don't want to be too glum, too blue, too down about things, but oh my God, not a brilliant weekend for us sports-wise, was it, Sharon?
No, in fact, yesterday, Sunday, was one of the worst sporting days of my entire life.
And that's saying something.
And there's been a few.
Oh dear. It is what it is, isn't it? So for anybody listening to this or watching this towards the end of the week, we always record the podcast on a Monday, so it literally is the day after. Things happened. So we had something to do with tennis and something to do with football and all that kind of stuff. So talk us through why it was so bad, Sharon.
Oh, it was just, well, it was just, I tell you what, the overriding feeling that I got from obviously the Wimbledon final, the men's final, and the football last night was just that air of inevitability about, that was why, Djokovic, Berrettini, he played amazing. He took the first set, he was playing well, but you're sitting here, you're just thinking, there'll be this little flurry. There'll be that. I've been here so many times before with Djokovic. I get my hopes up, and then he always wins. And so there was that. And then the football was the same. There was that kind of glimmer. Obviously, going up 1-0. The Italians came back. I mean, they were playing much, much better for sure. But then with the penalties, there was that little glimmer. When the Italians missed. But I was saying to you earlier, wasn't I, that normally, historically, the ones we've had in the past, I have literally not been able to watch. I've had to go in the garden and come back when it's all over. Or if I have been able to watch, I've been sat there with my head in my hands up behind the sofa or whatever. Yeah. But last night, I was sat there as calm. I just sat there and watched it because there was just the air of it. I can't even say inevitability about it. And I know that sounds really sad, but it was kind of like, oh God, here we are again.
I know exactly what you mean. I think in the first half, if we'd scored again in the first half, then I think that would have made a difference to how we played in the second half. But I think in the second half, we just kind of almost reverted to back to old ways and getting really defensive, and we let them back into the game. That was the thing. Our first sort of 20 minutes or so of the first half, we weren't letting them play, we weren't letting them settle, we had all the possession. It was fantastic, even after we'd scored the goal, which was after all only after a couple of minutes.
It was amazing.
It was incredible. I couldn't believe it. But we didn't capitalise on that, and I think everybody was so surprised that it was kind of, oh, now what? I'm sure it wasn't as simple as that, because there's a huge amount more that goes into these things. But I mean, It's one of those things where I think, the team have already got further than any other men's football team since 1966. So that absolutely has to be celebrated. We can talk tactics and strategy until we're blue in the face, but ultimately, I don't think I know that neither of us certainly, and certainly nobody in our immediate
Yeah,
circle has experience of being the England football manager
yeah,
or even
exactly. Yeah,
playing football for
yeah, yeah,
England.
yeah, yeah.
The closest I've come is that I gave a lift when I was a volunteer driver for the 2012 Olympics. I gave a lift to two of the Great Britain women's football team after the closing ceremony the next morning. It was Karen Carney and Rachel Yankee. And
Right.
Rachel Yankee was lovely. I'm sure
Yeah.
Karen Carney is, but she was so hungover, she spent pretty much the entire time kind of comatose on the back seat of the car.
God.
So they'd had a great closing ceremony, clearly. But that's as close as I'll ever come to anything like that. And yeah, it is what it is. And funnily enough, it gives us a brilliant sort of topic for our top of mind today, doesn't it?
Yeah, yeah,
You know,
absolutely, absolutely. But one thing I will say before we leave the topic of football, is that, when I saw those young lads step forward to take penalties, I just went, what are you thinking? What? What is he doing? Because it just seemed like, oh my God, it's like lambs to the slaughter, wasn't it?
yeah,
Now, it would have been a different, if that third one had gone in, we'd have all been going, oh, how amazing is he, a 19-year-old, but
yeah.
it was never going to end well, really, was it? Because this is the thing, there's a difference between, his rationale was, well, we decided that because of how they took penalties in training, but it doesn't matter how many times you take them in training, that is not in
Yeah.
any way going to replicate the reality of standing up with all that on the line, with millions of people looking at you. I mean, the most high pressure situation you could possibly imagine, and you'd barely kick the ball, because you'd only been on the pitch 2 minutes before. I mean, you can't replicate that. And so
I agree.
I do think that much as he's got a lot of stuff right, I do think Gareth Southgate really got that wrong. I really do.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to disagree slightly insofar as I don't think they've been on the pitch enough to kind
Yeah,
of
that's
get
what
their
I
heads
said.
in. No,
Yeah,
I agree with
yeah,
that. That's what I
yeah,
mean. I agree with that, but I don't think he got it wrong in bringing them on. I think it was right to bring them on, and I don't think it was necessarily wrong to allow them to take the penalty, because at their age they've got quite a few years ahead of them. So to have that sort of experience early on, that's going to make them toughen up mentally, like nothing else they can
mm,
experience, which is great news for the World Cup next year, for the next round of the Euros, and all this kind of stuff. I think that's a really good thing, even though I wouldn't want anybody to be in that situation and to suffer the heartbreak that I know that they're feeling, and all that kind of stuff. But wow, what an experience for them, to have had that.
well, can they go and have their experience somewhere else, please?
But they've got it now. That's the thing. They've got it now. And if you said to me, do you want to win the Euros or win the World Cup? It's going to be the World Cup. Of course it
Yeah,
is.
but
Of
I
course it
think the
is.
World Cup's going to be a different kettle of fish.
Oh,
I
of course
think,
it is. Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
the
But
opportunity was now. It was here. We were at home in front of all the fans. It was just an amazing opportunity. We've got,
yeah,
it's
I agree. It was an incredible opportunity. But again, that kind of, I don't want us to win when we've got everything going in our favour. I want us to win when there is, just as much jeopardy for us as there is anybody else, because then it stops the people going, oh, well, the only reason you won was because you were at home and you had your home fans and you had the easy side of the draw and you had this, that, and the other. And it's just, I mean, logically, that every team is there on their merits. That's how the qualification program works, and all the rest of it. And they have to, prove themselves over a period of time in order to get to the tournament in the first place. And that's what the group stages are all about, and all the rest of it. But I think, I don't want anybody to have a reason to say that when we do finally win something, on the men's football side, because all sorts of women's teams do brilliant stuff, which barely gets a mention ever. But when they do finally win something, I don't want people to have an excuse to go, oh well, they only won because. They should win on the merits of being the best team at that point in time. And I agree with you. I don't think we were the best team yesterday. I think for the first 20 minutes, 30 minutes of the first half, we were the best team.
And then they were just hanging on after that.
Exactly.
But two more things I just want to say before we leave this topic is the first one, spare a thought for the parents of those lads. I mean, can you imagine? I don't know whether they were in the stadium or whether they were at home watching. I mean, can you imagine seeing your lad just...
Totally.
That was when he was like sobbing on Gareth Southgate's shoulder. I mean, I was like, oh my God. That must have been awful for the parents. So spare a thought for them. But the other thing I would say is it could have been worse, right? It could have been worse because we could have lost a penalty shootout to the Germans.
This is true.
No way it could possibly have been worse.
This is true. So maybe it wasn't quite your worst ever.
No, indeed.
Anyway, apart from this sporting weekend that we'll move on from, what else happened for you last week, Sharon?
Well, it was a very, very sorry end to a very, very sorry week, I have to say. It was like last week was just... And actually, I'm feeling like I've been saying this a lot on the podcast recently. Like I've been having just rubbish weeks, but last week was particularly challenging, and it will link again to our top of mind.
Yeah,
there's been all sorts of stuff going on the house. Last Monday, I'm not sure whether it was before the podcast or after. Actually, I'm not sure. I know it was last Monday when the house. When the second lot of house buyers changed their minds and decided they didn't want to buy it after all for some ridiculous reason. So that was just really disappointing. And then we had somebody else then sort of come round on Wednesday who were literally like an hour inside the house. And I was here as well, just enthusing about how it was this, that and the other and all the rest of it. And oh my God, you'll be hearing from us by 5 o'clock today because it's, oh, when can you move, all this sort of stuff. And then we didn't hear from them by 5 o'clock today. And then we did hear from them the next day and they said they don't want to buy it. And so I was like, oh my God, this is just getting beyond a joke now.
It's silly, isn't it?
So we decided to go down another route, which means that it means that I will be able to take the matters into my own hands.
I was going to say, Sharon, the zesty action taker, steps forward and goes, no, I will not allow things to happen to me. I'm going to engineer them. Good for you.
I will not be at the mercy of ridiculous people, flaky nutcases.
Yeah.
I will not be, so, but that has all been quite difficult to work out and work through because there's lots of different big decisions to be made and money and all the rest of it, and so it's just and just everything has all been going on. And by the time I got to Friday, this was even before the tennis and football, I was just so done. I was exhausted mentally, like, oh, I can't do this anymore. I can't do this. I don't know where I want to live. I don't know what's going on. I don't know, do I want a business anymore? I've had enough. It just everything was just like, ugh.
So a week to write off then. Yeah. Okay. So in contrast, mine was just a relatively normal week last week, more than anything. Had a chiropractic appointment. I have one every 5 to 6 weeks on Tuesday, so sort of cracked back into shape again, which was good. And I'm trying to convince my chiropractor. He went skiing for the first time. I think it was last year, but obviously much prior to lockdown. But unfortunately, he went with a bunch of people who were of mixed abilities, and there is something about blokes who are good skiers have absolutely no empathy or compassion or concern for people who are still learning. Like, oh no, come do this, all the rest of it. And invariably, and I've heard this happen so many times, invariably, the person who is the beginner, whether they're a bloke, whether they're a woman, whether they are old or young or anywhere in between, they end up really disliking skiing because of this idiot who's going, oh, come down here, it'll be fine. And then they just, bugger off down the slope and leave this person to fall and get scared and all this kind of stuff. And it's just like, you shouldn't be anywhere near people who are just learning. So I've been sort of talking to him and saying, look, you really need to go with somebody who will absolutely lead you, and you need to trust them that they will not take you down any slope that you can't handle. That doesn't mean it's all going to feel easy. There will be times when you feel like you're being challenged, and that's good, but it won't feel like you're going to die at any second, which is kind of what happens when you get these jock skiers trying to take people. So I'm working on him. Every 5 or 6 weeks, I sort of, sow a little more seeds there. So we'll get him out on the slopes again eventually. That'd be good. So lots going on for me in terms of online kind of stuff, obviously, naturally. But I got to run the clinic for the first time.
You did,
on Thursday.
Yes, indeed you did. And
So,
how did that go?
it was great. So this is for anybody that hasn't picked up on this. This is in the Trainer Talk community. Normally we had monthly online business clinics where anybody could come in with a challenge and get the sort of the herd wisdom, so to speak, from anybody else that was there. So we had people turning up with challenges, people turning up without a challenge who thought of one halfway through, and people who just wanted to come and say hello with a cuppa and to offer their 2 penneth for whatever the challenge was. Now, because we've shifted those to weekly for all sorts of reasons, we knew that we'd probably get fewer people and challenges less often and that kind of thing. But what did happen was we had a small but perfectly formed group of sort of 4 or 5 people. One person sort of jumped in and jumped out again, but it was lovely to see them there anyway. And we only had one challenge to deal with, which took us all of 20 minutes. And it was the age-old one of I'm setting up my business. Should I stay as a sole trader or turn into a limited company? So that was a good one for people to give their thoughts on. And it was really great because we had some people there who were limited companies, some people from the beginning, some people who had gone from sole trader to limited company, and some people who are still sole traders. So it was great. It was we got a real sort of range of experience and thoughts on that. And because it sort of only took about 20 minutes, because that was really the only challenge that was there, I then sort of threw in a question to people to get them thinking about things. And that took us another 20 minutes. And then it's like, right, great. So, we'd allowed an hour and a half, which sometimes we need on the business clinics, but I was able to sort of let them go after 40 minutes.
Let them go. You are released.
Totally. I said, I'm not letting you go after 20 minutes. That's far too early. But, so it was good. We had just had a nice discussion. And I think, because we had, as I say, 4 or 5 people there, but only one person with a challenge, it just goes to show that the majority of people had turned up wanting to offer help or just wanting to drop in for a cuppa. So I felt it was important to keep them for longer than 20 minutes to make them feel like, they'd had an opportunity. And it was good. We had some good discussions about things, and it gave people stuff to think about. As well, which I think is always good on there. So that was cool. And then what else happened? I had various other bits and pieces going on. Nothing exciting sort of launch-wise or anything like that at the moment. Just really keeping things ticking over, which is good. And then at the weekend, I was up at Mum and John's again. And Mum was out all day on Saturday doing bowls stuff again. So I ended up making sure that John ate, which was fine. So we had Hunter's chicken this week, very nice, from Marks and Spencer's. So got all of that sorted out. And then, of course, yesterday was sports day. What normally happens is John is relegated to the back room to watch football when it's just normal football, and Mum stays in the front room and watches whatever she wants, which is normally either Midsummer or Foyle's War or Vera or one of those.
And then yesterday I said, no, actually, I want to watch the final as well. So she got relegated to the back room. So John and I were in the front room watching the football on the big telly. So that was good, although poor Scamp didn't quite know how to take it because he knew that the tension was in the air. He's like, I don't know what's going on here. So he ended up taking himself upstairs because he wasn't quite sure. So we've talked at length about how all of that went. This morning, the weather seems to have decided that it's not happy with the sporting outcomes either.
Summer here in Wales.
Yeah. Well, apparently it's going to be summer from Wednesday onwards here, which is nice. Can't wait. But oh my goodness, the weather has been so miserable. It really has. And what's really weird is that it's not that cold. I mean, I know you said your heating had kicked in. Mine hasn't. It's not been that cold here, but it's just been damp, really damp and horrible. And this morning, big downpour. So on Saturday morning, we did our normal walk around the course. And I was wearing my raincoat, my rain hat, and shorts and wellies. It was really tight. Am I going to a festival or something? Really bizarre. But so that was it really. That was my week. So.
Oh, well, a lot better than mine was. So, anyway, which kind of moves us on to our top of mind.
It does.
Does it not?
It does. So we were sort of thinking about, it was disappointing for the team, England football team, men's England football team. It was disappointing for Berrettini in his final on Saturday. It was disappointing for Pliskova losing to Barty in the women's final. And for all the doubles players, I do enjoy watching doubles, I have to say. And it was obviously disappointing for the losing pairs in that as well. But one of the things that I was talking about in my 2-minute thinker to the Get That Gang group this morning was it's not so much the fact that you have a down, it's what you do after the disappointment that matters. And I was comparing it to when I do assessing of hockey umpires. And it's the same for coaching, but particularly with assessing, what I am specifically looking for is not so much that they've mucked something up. It happens. Everybody makes a duff decision at some point in their lives. It's not so much that they muck it up. It's what happens in the 5 to 10 minutes after they've mucked it up. That's the point I'm interested in, because that then tells me how mentally prepared they are to work on their own game. And it's the umpires who muck something up and then lose it for the rest of the match. That is a far bigger conversation than the umpires that muck something up. Might take 30 seconds to a minute or two to just kind of shake themselves off and get back into the game, but they don't let it affect the rest of their game. They recognise it as an isolated incident. They recognise it as something that actually they can't do anything about that. The only thing they can alter is how they deal with the rest of the match. And I think it's the same for anybody that loses at sport or anybody that suffers some kind of setback in their business. It's not so much the setback, because setbacks happen. It's how you deal with it moving forward. And this for me is about we can spout the cliche. It's there's no such thing as failure, just feedback. You don't want to run away from what's happened. You want to take the learnings from what's happened. You want to understand why things didn't go the way you wanted them to go, but you also want to kind of recognize that it is an isolated incident, kind of, depending on what it is, obviously. And there's nothing you can do about it. We don't have time machines. We can't go back and change what's happened. The only thing we can influence is moving forward. So that's kind of where I was going with that one. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. It is. You can absolutely equate that to business, can't you? Because we do all have setbacks. So we might have times like I've had this week where I've just literally been, questioning everything because of, other things that have been going on. You just kind of feel, oh no, I'm not sure whether I want to do this anymore. And it's about having that. But I think it's about recognizing that you are going to get times like that in your business. They are. I don't care who you are. You could have the most successful business ever or whatever, but you are going to get times where, for whatever reason, things aren't going according to plan, or you have things in your life that mean that you are bringing, less energy
Absolutely.
to the table. And that's, we all have stuff going on that do, that does affect us, don't we? So it's about how you deal with that stuff. And I know that, I've been in situations like this many times. It was particularly bad last week, but I always know that it will pass.
Yeah.
I always know. The minute I start to think it's not going to pass, then I'm really in trouble. But I know, I've said to you, and it's all about as well, sort of recognizing patterns in your business too, because I've come to realize as well that around this time of year, because it is so full on for most of the time, and it has been really full on, particularly I think since March last year through COVID, everything. When I get to this time of year, knowing that I've got August coming up where I do have a Zoom pre-month, I do start feeling that I'm just ready for a break, a mental break as much as anything. But allowing myself to kind of recognize that that's where I am is helpful when I'm dealing with it, because I don't have to like have this big panic like, oh my God, this is okay, this is kind of normal, this is how it goes. Usually.
Totally. I think that's really important, is to understand the cyclical nature, the seasonal, if you like, nature of your business, which of course you can only do when you've been in business for more than a year, which is why I think for you particularly, I know you go back and look at what you've written in your journal for, this time last year, how was I? And you're able to recognise the patterns in your business because of that. But I think you're absolutely right. I think we are coming up to a period of having kind of been in this really weird place for more than a year now with all the COVID stuff and all that kind of stuff. And I know you had your Zoom break last August, which for the podcast turned into a longer break for us, didn't it? Because it was all so intense with everything that was going on. But at the same time, recognizing that, this time of year, you're allowed to feel a bit kind of, I need a bit of a break now. I need a bit of a breather, a time to move on. For me, I'm not taking a break, a Zoom break in August, although I am planning to have, I think it's a week, it's either just short of a week, like an afternoon short of a week, or it's a week and an afternoon. I can't remember which way around I was able to do it. I was ever so pleased that I managed to find that space in my diary, to be honest. It's an odd one. It's not a sort of a Sunday to a Sunday type thing. I think I'm doing I think it's the Thursday after the business clinic, like, right, that's it until next Thursday lunchtime or something like that. So I'm taking a bit of a break, but I will still be having things like Zoom meetings and that kind of thing, but I'm putting the time aside to say, right, I'm going to let everybody know I am not dealing with client work during that time. And I'm really looking forward to that. And I've not been brilliant at doing that for sure over the last few years. But you have to recognise that there will be tough periods, there will be tough times, there will be situations that you have to deal with that don't go brilliantly. And just because those situations are there doesn't mean that the overall is terrible and not good and not functioning and all the rest of it. It's just, the trick, isn't it, is to recognise, is this an isolated incident, or is this a pattern that I can deal with, or is it indicative of something more? Because if you, like you say, if you find yourself constantly feeling like, why am I bothering, what am I doing, then that I think is something bigger than, oh, I'm just a bit tired, a bit run down, need a break.
No, absolutely. I think noticing patterns, recording patterns, it is just really, really powerful, because it does stop you when you do have a setback. It does stop you going into that panic mode, and it does stop you it's trying to sort of making something mean something that it shouldn't really mean, if that makes sense,
It does, absolutely. I mean, we are superb. Human beings are excellent at forming what's called complex equivalences,
Yeah,
which is from the NLP world. And it's this idea that we take one thing and we take something else, and the relationship between the two, we make it have some kind of meaning. So, for example, I know that there would be people watching the match yesterday that would have had their lucky shirt on, or lucky socks, or lucky pants, or whatever. And that's okay, that's fine. But really, there isn't any meaning between, well, if I wear my lucky shirt, they're going to win. Because clearly that's been disproven from yesterday. But it's we're to bring it to sort of a business level.
yeah,
It's, oh well, if I win this contract, then that means that I'm brilliant at everything, and that's a
yeah,
complex equivalence. No, it doesn't. It
yeah,
means you're brilliant at winning that contract.
yeah,
And you might be very good at winning contracts, and that's great. But then
yeah,
if you don't win a contract, it doesn't immediately mean that you are rubbish at winning contracts. It just means
yeah,
that you haven't won that contract. That's what it
yeah,
means. And
yeah,
I think we need to catch ourselves sometimes attaching these additional, sometimes hidden meanings to things that happen in our business, and blowing it into something more than it actually is.
yeah,
And again, this comes down to this idea of um, I'm hesitating to say mental toughness, because it's not so much about mental toughness, it's more about mental resilience.
yeah,
Because resilience doesn't say, and lots of people think that resilience is about being able to bounce back from things. It's not necessarily about bouncing back. Resilience is about being able to recognize when you are in the middle of something that's a tough situation, but also understanding that just because you're in the middle of something that's a tough situation, it doesn't mean it's going to be that way forever.
yeah.
And that, I think, is so important.
Yeah. And I think another important component of it as well is self-knowledge,
Mm.
because, and this is why what has helped me with that is, the noticing and writing stuff down in the journal and stuff like that. So I can notice the triggers and notice the feelings and notice any seasonal, patterns and things like that. Notice any hormonal patterns, because, that quite often is the reason why you
Yes.
feel or behave in a certain way. But I've completely lost my train of thought now. What was I saying before? Oh, I see hormonal patterns.
So noticing the patterns.
Yes, knowing yourself, self-knowledge. Yeah, self-knowledge. Because one of the things that really helped me massively this week to make the decision that I've made is that I know I'm not very good at, yes, we've talked about not very good about when, I can't take action,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm also not very good at living in a state of limbo.
Yeah.
So many people have said, oh, well, you've got no rush to sell the house. Just sit tight and do this, that, and the other. I can't live like that.
No.
I just can't.
Mm-hmm.
I can't sit back. It's got to be one way or no way, or,
Yeah.
I can't live like that.
Yeah.
And I like to have certainty as much as I can.
Mm-hmm.
Not security, because that's a different thing, but certainty, knowing what direction you're going to be heading in, knowing where you're going to be living is one thing, or not living or whatever.
Yeah.
And I'm just not very good at that. So knowing that helps me to figure out, what is the best way for me, or sometimes just knowing, when you have had a setback in business, knowing how to deal with it, because you know yourself,
Yeah, completely. I think it's a hugely important thing for all business owners to do as much work as they can about understanding themselves, because then you understand how you can react in certain situations. You understand what your own patterns are and your own cycles are and your own seasonality to these things, whether they are hormonal or not. You can understand yourself and understand how you might respond to something, and then you can start doing the work of picking yourself up when perhaps you are giving yourself a little bit too much in the way of negative self-talk and that kind of thing, and also learning to be your own cheerleader, which I think is something that lots of people are terrible at. They don't understand how to be their own best friend, or they don't understand how to be their own cheerleader, or how to congratulate themselves when they've done something well. Which I mean, that took me ages to work out, because this is a childhood memory thing. I can, since as long as I can remember, I have really annoyed people because I'm good at quite a lot of things. I find it easy to pick things up. I find it easy to look at something, to model people, to do whatever. So as a consequence, I was good at quite a lot of stuff as a kid. And you would not believe the stuff that came my way, because, oh, she's so boastful. Oh, she shows off. Oh, she does. So what I learned was that it wasn't good to be good. What I learned was to hide how good I was at things. And what I learned was to never tell myself that I was good at something, because that was showing off. And it took ages to unpick that and to go, you know what, dag nabbit, I am proud. I am really proud of being able to look at something and go, oh, I'd quite like to try that. Let me try that. And actually being quite good at it. Now, that's not to say everything. I know my boundaries. I know there are some things that I am terrible at. But part of being able to congratulate myself at things that I'm good at is also recognizing that that doesn't mean that I think I'm good at everything, because I know I'm not. And just because other people might have that hang up, that's their problem.
And as I say, I know the things that I'm good at, and I know I'm not good at living in limbo. I know I'm not good at not being able to take my own decisions. And remember, Mark Terrell, one of our Trainers Up members, he did a fantastic session at Trainers Up Live on motivational maps. And when he did that, because he did my profile, didn't he, and shared it with everyone, it made so much sense, because there it was, that my top one is spirit, which basically means I don't like people telling me what to do or being in charge of my destiny. I like to take control of my own destiny. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. And I mean, my spirit wasn't mine, but I'm so with you on that. I think I'm pretty confident there is no way either of us are ever going to have somebody that we call boss ever again. It's just not going to happen. It's, sorry. Absolutely. I think knowing yourself is so important, because then that does help you to develop that resilience and that ability to recognize something for what it is. And that's not to say that recognizing this and knowing yourself means that you will never feel the down of not winning a contract or something not going your way. Of course you'll feel that. That's life. There will be things that just don't work out the way we would like them to work out. But what it does mean is that we will be able to recognize it for what it is, and then know that it's not going to be that way forever, and that there will be ups as well, and there will also be times when things are just ticking along, and that's fine. Nothing wrong with that at all. So
absolutely.
All right.
So there you go, people.
We put the world to rights again. Everything's fine. All right. So on to the dog walking digest. Anything to bring us this week? What's Jem been up to?
Not really. She's sitting in a chair looking at me. She's we were laughing actually about her changing behaviour now that she's getting to be, a senior citizen. How, in the past with the football and, with us being really excited and shouting and all the rest of it, she would literally be, getting excited as well. She would, in our old house, we had French doors at the back of the, I say the front room, but it was actually at the back of the house, and French doors into the garden. And so, we always used to have them open generally in the summer and things. And so when we get excited, watching the Olympics, watching the, the football, the tennis, all that sort of things, where, she would, immediately pick up on and run out into the garden and run around and barking. And it was just all part of it, but she doesn't do that anymore. She just slept through the whole football last night.
Oh, bless her.
Or woke up to have a bit of dinner, obviously, but then once that was, then she was back in her bed, and I kind of miss that.
I know,
you know.
I know. Yeah, I'm noticing a little bit with Scamp that just every now and again it's just like he's quite happy in himself, but he's just plodding along behind on the walks, and in no
Yeah,
particular rush to get anywhere. And it's different from having a I've got to sniff everything moment. It's just
yeah,
that he just doesn't want to go that quickly, and it's kind of, oh
yeah,
yeah, and just notice one or two times, and he'd rather, for example, this morning when I came back in from having been to the gym. Normally he will be off the bed and coming to the door to greet me, and this morning is like,
yeah,
I can't be bothered, and he just wanted to lie on the bed,
yeah,
and that's fine.
yeah.
But yeah, I know what you mean. I know
That's
what
the
you mean.
thing. She seems to be spending more and more time in her bed, and getting really tucked up. And she's absolutely smart cat. Ryan and I we'd been out somewhere last week, and we came. Oh yeah, I can't remember. Anyway, we were out. We'd been to the gym,
Yeah,
and we came back, and we just got into the house, and there she was in a bed and not fast asleep. We were standing over going, Gem, shouting at her, Gem, until she woke up. Like, when she was younger, she'd be at the door,
yeah,
sort of,
yeah.
see this, and now she doesn't even hear us coming in. So,
Oh, bless
but
her.
other than that, she's good,
Well, this
Bless her.
week, this week I need to tell you the tale of Ziggy.
Oh
Ziggy,
dear, what have we got now?
Ziggy the chocolate Labrador. So,
Oh,
um, lots of you will know, but for those that don't, Scamp and I mainly walk over at Queen's Park, which is near me in Bournemouth, which is also, as well as being a public open space, it's an 18-hole golf course.
yeah,
And as part of it being a golf course, some of the areas, they've built up the ground to be certain places. So there are places where they do the teeing off, and then obviously there are greens and a few bunkers here and there. But sometimes they've moved some of the earth around to create some of those things. And at the 15th hole, they have obviously excavated a bit of the ground to make the tee area,
yeah,
which is absolutely fine, except when it gets very, very wet, as it has been. So this kind of dip in the ground
yeah.
forms a lovely muddy puddle. Oh, yes, it
Oh,
does.
lovely.
And Ziggy, being Ziggy, the chocolate Labrador who loves water, Ziggy's owner doesn't take him near the pond because then he'll jump in. Oh no. But what Ziggy did do is find this huge muddy puddle.
Oh.
Yeah, hippos would be proud of this puddle for sure. And it was hilarious because we were walking past, and Scamp barely shows any interest in puddles of any
Yeah.
description. So we were just walking past, and poor Ziggy's owner was, Ziggy, get out of there, get out of there, like this. Ziggy was having none of it. Ziggy was having a whale of a time with his ball, and this puddle was big enough for him to have his ball in his mouth at one end, chuck it out of his mouth, and it bounce at the other end. So he'd turn around and launch himself to create this huge splash to grab his ball at the other end of the puddle. He was just having such a good time. You know what labs are like, and retrievers, and any dog that loves water really loves the water. He was having a whale of a time, and I was just looking at his poor owner thinking, there's no point. You can yell yourself hoarse. He is not coming out until he's ready from that puddle. It was just so lovely to see. I mean, I feel sorry for the owner, but to see a dog having such unbridled joy of a puddle, it was just hilarious. It really was. So I thought you'd enjoy the tale of Ziggy and the puddle from
Thank you
Queen's
very
Park.
much. I did.
You just imagine it was, way more water, yay. Oh dear. Anyway, that's it, I think, isn't it, for
Yes,
everything for this week?
absolutely. Yeah. On that note, we will love you and leave you
Indeed.
for this week. Have a great week. Oh God, Sharon, see, brain fog. A great week, everybody.
There you go. That's the one. Yeah.
Got there in the end. And we shall see you next time.
We will.
Take
care.
care.
Bye.
Bye.